Welcome to Pregnant Tea, your cozy corner in the world of pregnancy where we sip on stories, wisdom, and the occasional cup of actual tea. I'm your host, Kendra Pace from Natural State Wellness. Each week, we brew up candid conversations with mothers who've walked the path you're on, sharing their triumphs, challenges, and everything in between. We also invite professionals to spill the tea on tips, tricks, and techniques for each stage of pregnancy. We'll be talking about everything from prenatal care to postpartum recovery. So whether you're a first-time mom-to-be or a seasoned pro, grab your favorite mug and settle into your comfiest chair as we venture into this crazy and wonderful world of pregnancy together. Today on Pregnant Tea, we've got Eve, and she's going to be sharing her story with IUI and IVF. So you can start with telling us about yourself and your family.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm very happy to share my story because when I was going through it, I didn't have the most support, and it was only a few years ago, but I wish I had more support. So if I can help people, I'm very happy to help. Both my wife and myself, we went through IVF to have kids. I had my daughter in 2021. Her name is Zoe. And she ended up having Nico in 2023. So we have two very different experiences, and I'm happy to speak on both. We knew we had a ton of love to give. So we found out about CNY Fertility. There's a bunch of clinics all around, and I'm not promoting that one. There's a ton of clinics, and they're around to help you go through this process. So we started out with them with just a consultation. It took a few months. Our first step was trying to find a donor. And there's a ton of cryobanks. So we looked through probably every cryobank for a donor that we liked. And we were kind of specific. I wanted someone who was a little bit more Italian, because we're both Italian, which is surprisingly hard to find because they're usually very religious and aren't usually donors, being a little stereotypical there. But we ended up going through a lot of names, and it took probably about 6 months to find a donor that we both agreed on. And I think the biggest thing for us was the medical history. My family is generally healthy. Her family, it has a few health issues here and there. So having a healthy donor was probably our biggest thing, more important than looks and hair and eye color and all that. So we picked a donor we liked. The purchasing of sperm, I'm going to give a little funny backstory, is it's very expensive. And we ended up doing Instacart to gain money to buy sperm. And it just so happened it was during the pandemic. So there were a lot of people doing Instacart and requesting Instacart, and it was basically a job that we both did on top of our jobs, and it worked out. It's seeing the positive in a bad situation, but we were able to get enough money to buy enough donor vials to be successful, because it may be good and you might get pregnant in one vial in one attempt, but you might have a person like myself where it took 6 attempts. So, and both are okay. And I'm going to give my story. I'm going to give Chelsea's story. Chelsea was 1 attempt and I was 6 attempts. So,
And going back to finding a donor, so me and my wife eventually will be going through this process. And so we've looked into it a little bit, but I feel like no one prepares you. Some people are like, it's like a catalog and you literally get to pick what you want. So What was your experience with that?
It's interesting. It's like you're almost dating again, looking for the characteristics that you like. And you could be picky and choosy, but you could filter things. And if you add more filters, you're going to get less options. Right. But it's not something you should rush through. It probably took us about 6 months to find what we wanted in not a partner, but the person we're going to be creating. It's a wonderful electronic system now. It used to be my friends went to a clinic and they flipped through a book.
Right.
So a few years later, we've made a lot of progress and everything's electronic now. There's donors international, but then there's donors where it's local to your location, and they don't give you any information. You really have to do a lot of digging if you wanted to find anything out, but they're anonymous. Or they could be ID release at 18. And that's what we wanted. We wanted to have both of our children be able to reach out and have communication with the donor if they wanted to, if they chose to. So they have to be the one to reach out to the bank and get his information at 18 years old and be able to have communication. But you don't have to do that. There's a lot of families who choose not to, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong. So after we had everything delivered from the sperm bank to the clinic, it came down to the first process is called an HSG. And it's basically prepping your body to be able to be ready for whatever process you choose to do. And there's several different processes. Obviously, we're a same-sex couple, so we're kind of limited to IUI or IVF. There were more heterosexual couples in the clinic than anything because fertility issues are a huge thing now. And there's probably a lot of factors that go into it, but there are things to be able to help you. It's not just you struggling or having obstacles to be able to achieve your dream. But when we finally got past the HSG, which was a very interesting process, I have a pretty good pain tolerance, but that was a tough procedure for me. So, but for Chelsea, she didn't think anything of it. So the next process is IUI. And that basically is when they take your donor sperm and implant it directly in at the perfect time after constant surveillance of your egg quality and depending on where you are with the fertility drugs. And that's kind of where I should start is they end up putting you on a bunch of fertility drugs that they've done a ton of research on to see what is the best method. Stuff that I did 3 years ago is probably very different now, but they know what they're doing. They are tweaking numbers to get everything to be the perfect situation for you. It's important to put a lot of trust in them, but it's also important to advocate for yourself and remember that these are clinics who are seeing thousands of people every month. So you really have to do your research. And I did a lot of research in terms of what might be the best, what might work, what might not work, just so I had an idea when I went into it of what they were talking about. But again, advocate for yourself. When they mention something you don't know, ask them. When you are given the fertility drugs and you have to know how much to give you and location to give the shot, ask them. Each time I tried, I would ask them and just confirm again, just to know for ease of mind that I was doing it correctly. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you. And going back to that, when everything was well and good and they felt was the perfect time to implant the sperm, we did IUI, and then you have your 2-week wait. And that's a very stressful time because you're constantly thinking, am I pregnant? Am I pregnant? And you have to think you're pregnant because you have to act and treat your body in a different way and eat healthy and drink enough and rest. And there's all those old wives' tales that you have to do. And whether you chose to do them or not,
Did you put your legs up on the wall after?
Yep. So I ended up doing 3 IUI cycles because my insurance required it before we moved to IVF. Since then, my insurance has changed that process and Chelsea was able to do just IVF. We went through 3 IUIs. Each time, unfortunately, I was unsuccessful. And there's just statistics on everything, but I know people who have gotten pregnant with 1 IUI. So again, it's your body. And if it's going to work, it's going to work. If it's not, it's not.
Did they require a specific time period between when you could start your next IUI?
It's a great question because it is a very mentally draining process.
I would imagine.
Especially when you get that call where, unfortunately, you're not pregnant. And, I know they give those calls all the time, so they're not going to spend 15 minutes on a phone call with you to make you feel better. But you can choose to either start the process right again or take some time. And I've known people who've done both. I chose to do it right again because I felt, hey, the medicine's in my body. Let me just continue. Let me continue until I'm successful. But there are a lot of people who can't do that. And that's okay. You have to kind of make the decision yourself. You have to wait for your next period, your next menstrual cycle to occur. And on the first day of your cycle, you call the clinic, make an appointment. And that's when they start. When you're about to taper off and not have your period anymore, then you will start your fertility drugs and go through the whole process again. They have it timed out basically every day. And it's a hard process. I was able to do it, thankfully, at the clinic I was at 6 a.m. appointments. Wow. So I leave at 5:30, 5:15, drive up, do my testing, and then come to work and be on time without anybody knowing.
Oh my gosh. And how did you deal with the mental preparedness of starting another cycle after you just found out that unfortunately it didn't take this time?
I guess believing that it's going to happen and always having that positive mindset. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And yeah, where there are instances where it doesn't happen for people. And I have friends who've been through this process and unfortunately don't have a child. My heart hurts for them because I know the pain they went through. I was fortunate enough to have a success, but it doesn't happen to everyone. It's hard. And it's something that you have to rely on friends, family, your partner if you have one. But there are people who go through this alone, and it's just a matter of mentally pushing yourself through it to know you tried at least. Even if you don't have a child at the end, you tried, and you tried to be able to give your love to someone, and it might not have worked out. And there are other options. I know it takes a long time and a lot of money, and it's a very difficult process. But I think you just have to every day realize like, hey, I'm trying, and then you'll know if you want to give up or not. And it's sad. It's sad when somebody has to come to that decision, but fertility, it's a tough journey. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. So once you went through your 3 rounds, you went right into IVF?
We did. So the next step before IVF is an egg retrieval. Each time your clinic is developing a plan for you based off of what happened last time, if you had reoccurring miscarriages, if you just didn't become pregnant. So for egg retrieval, it was kind of a total different set of fertility drugs. And I have to say, some of the people who are on these fertility drugs, it affects them greatly. I was fortunate enough to not really have any issues because you're using steroids, you're using drugs that have never been in your body, hormones, it's changing your personality.
Yeah.
But it's keeping your clinic aware as, hey, this is really affecting me. Is there something else I can do? Because there's definitely other options for each medicine. There's generic options for your medicine. Around COVID, when I went through the fertility journey, some medicine was kind of hard to find. So we had to travel, I think, 3 hours to find one medicine just to go to a pharmacy that actually held it. So
Wow.
there's a process to this, and you just have to work together and know what could happen in the end and just remain positive. But
Yeah.
so when it came to egg retrieval, you're basically under a surgical procedure. You are put under an anesthesia. They only do it when you have a good amount of eggs to retrieve. They go for a certain size and a certain amount to be able to retrieve them, or they're not going to do it, which is fine. You'd rather wait for when your body is ready than them do it and only get a few number of eggs. I was fortunate enough to get a large number, but Chelsea, she didn't get a large number. So it just depends on your body. And I'm not the most versed in it, but each egg is graded. There's a certain number of days, and then the quality is AA, BB, C, all the way down, I think, to D or E. After your retrieval, each IVF is called a transfer. So they transfer where they put the egg and sperm together to hopefully have it grow and mature to a certain time. It's day 3, day 4, day 5. And depending on the quality, they'll grade them. And in the clinic I was at, they had the embryologist sitting in the back, microscopes, beautiful equipment, making sure that you are going to be as successful as possible. So when it came to my first retrieval, which I did, and then our first transfer, which was right the next month, I kind of did everything boom right after one another. My first transfer ended up in a pregnancy. So of course we're super excited. We give each other cards. We're going to be moms. And unfortunately, it turned into a miscarriage. So that was a very hard process because it was right around the holidays. We were excited. If we ended up being pregnant and going to full term, it would have been born right around my dad's birthday. And he unfortunately passed away. So it was kind of like we're super excited for this moment, and it was taken away from us. But I also think in that hardship and that pain that we were going through, it helped us grow. So we said, let's just do it again. We cried, we shed our tears, and we said, let's go again. Chelsea was very understanding. She said, if you need to take a break, take a break. And I said, nope, I'm going to choose to just go right ahead and go again. So we went through the whole month cycle, and then I called the clinic again and I said, let's go, let's do our second transfer. Second transfer ended up in no pregnancy. So we ended up just going through the motion. And then finally, our third one ended up in a pregnancy that was successful. It was kind of that, hey, I've been through several hard months. Let's celebrate and be joyful, but also, all right, we got to be in panic mode still because something might happen. But we had each other, and we were at this moment actually where it was so hard. And this is kind of my bit of advice, is we wanted to be excited and tell people we were going through this journey. And every time it was unsuccessful, we had to go and tell them, oh, it didn't work. So we said on our last one, we're like, we're not going to tell anybody. We're just going to tell everyone we're taking a break, and we're not going to tell everyone. And that was the one that was successful. They say that the 12-week mark is when you can kind of feel that you're in the almost clear. So that's when we were like, all right, we're good. We're going to start telling people. And thankfully, I was able to go through, I think, 36, 38 weeks before my water broke. But in the end, it was the journey. I was very lucky to be successful. And we both have a beautiful daughter, 2.5 years old now. And then kind of circling back to Chelsea. So when Chelsea went through the process, she didn't have to do IUI. She went right to egg retrieval and IVF. And she was successful in her first transfer. She was a little bit younger. I would go first because I'm a little older. But age doesn't matter. I was considered geriatric because I was 35 years old, which is something you never thought you would hear when you're 35 years old. It's just how you choose to go about it. And she was thankfully successful in the first round. She could handle her stress a little bit better than I can, but in the end, she went pretty much 40 weeks and had a healthy baby boy.
Wow. And how was your pregnancy? Did you experience a lot of adverse symptoms, or were both of you guys feeling pretty good?
We were the opposite. I was very lucky. So I had the easiest pregnancy you could ever imagine. I had no symptoms. I had no morning sickness, a little bit of nausea. I just had Sour Patch Kids and that got it away. But I had good appointments. I felt kicks when I was supposed to feel kicks, and everything was good. My water broke at 38 weeks, and I decided to take a week or two before maternity leave, before I have a delivery, and let me enjoy a little bit, get ready. And Zoe didn't want to wait. She wanted to come out right then. So we went for a hike in the morning. And when I came home, I was like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom and my water broke. So that was that. Chelsea was in the panic mode where she's like, we gotta go, we gotta rush. And I was like, I need to shower. I was like, we just went hiking. I need to shower. So we stopped, we got some food, and I walk into the hospital like no big deal. And she's the stressed out one, which was odd. It's usually I'm the stressed out one, but I said, we can't be stressed. We have to kind of go through this. And stress puts a lot of negative energy into your body, and it's not good for yourself or the baby. Yeah. So I ended up having to have a C-section. When we went there, everything was great. Nothing was wrong, but I wasn't having contractions, but my water broke. So there was no fluid in there. So with each semi-contraction I was having, which apparently were very hard, but weren't real contractions. Zoe's heart rate was going from like 150 to 50. They came in and they said, this has been happening for a few hours. It's putting a lot of stress on the baby. So it's not required, but we recommend a C-section. I said to myself, we didn't get this far for something to happen. And I said, let's go. So it's probably I know a lot of people are against C-sections, but I said, let's go. I've seen it from both ways. You're getting a healthy baby. That's all that matters.
Right.
Within 7 minutes, that baby was in my arms and she was screaming, and that was worth getting 7 layers of my body cut open to pull the baby out. And I'm very proud of myself for going through that. And it's no matter what way you deliver. Chelsea delivered natural, if you want to say, and we both in the end had healthy babies, and that's all that matters.
Wow. And that's pretty remarkable for you to have both obviously gone through. I feel like this is a benefit, amongst other things, with a same-sex marriage, is you guys can relate to each other. So you've got a spouse who hasn't gone through it, and it's not the same. So the fact that once it was Chelsea's turn, you guys reflect on that together, and how special is that?
It is. And it was, she had a little bit different of a journey. She had every symptom that you could have: morning sickness, pain, throwing up. But once that passed, because it only lasts a certain amount of time, once that passed, she had some issues with her blood pressure, and she had to be monitored a little bit more. But you know what? Extra monitoring is okay. If it gives you that ease of mind, I would have taken some extra monitoring, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're just trying to make sure your baby is as healthy as it can be. So
anything else throughout the journey that you'd like to touch on?
I think it's just trusting yourself, trusting your doctors, and then advocating for yourself.
Yeah. Did you have a pretty good experience with your healthcare providers once you were in this setting of labor and delivery?
I did. And it's something you always have to think about, especially being a same-sex couple. There are still, even in 2024, there's people out there who don't accept, they refer to it as lifestyle. But you have to do your research. We made sure we found a provider that listed as LGBTQ friendly. And if we didn't feel that in the first appointment, we would have switched, and that's okay. So you just kind of have to do your research, know where you need to go. We took recommendations from friends for the provider we went through, and they had several facilities. So we had the option of going to 3 different locations, which was great for appointments. When you're going through the fertility clinic, you might be going back just for level testing every 2 days. So you have to remember that you have to be prepared to kind of do some traveling and find facilities that can do the testing and then transfer it over to your clinic as well, because that is an option.
Wow, that's pretty frequent. And touching back on you guys doing your research for your provider, I love that. I try to make sure that I recommend that to everyone, same sex or not, to just really make sure that you vibe with your provider, and to remind people that you start with someone and you start to get a yucky vibe, then fire them. You know what I mean? Like, you can go on and move on to someone else, and that's totally okay.
Absolutely. They're going to be with you for over 9 months. So you want to have a good relationship.
Definitely,
It's
definitely.
okay. The provider you might have for that whole journey is probably not going to be the one that's doing your delivery, and it's okay. They might not be on call at that time. Mine was actually on call all the way up until about an hour before, and then I had to have the C-section. So, and it's okay. It worked out.
Right,
The
right.
person who replaced her was amazing, and I still have my appointments with her today for gynecological care. So,
Oh, that's so great. So anything else you want to share, maybe for either same-sex couples who might be going through the same journey, or just someone who's going to be first time pregnant and they end up having to go through a fertility clinic?
it's funny because we live in a pretty liberal state here in New York and in the Northeast, but my mom lives out in Florida. So if we ever went to go travel to Florida, which is a little bit more of a conservative state, you have to be prepared that they might not accept your children, your last names, marriage certificate. So we ended up having to go through the adoption journey as well. So, which is very frustrating because you go through this whole process, you get your names on the birth certificate, and you think that you're both the parents of this baby, but we ended up having to have Chelsea adopt Zoe, and I have to adopt Nico in order to have them as legal healthcare proxy rights for these children. And it's a horrible thing to have to do. And you have to basically have someone from the county come to your house and basically comes in and make sure that Chelsea is going to be a fit parent for Zoe through a whole house visit interview. She had to have friends write letters proving that she'd be a good mom. And then you have to pay a lot of money. And even though both names are on the birth certificate, you still need to do this if you're going to be doing a lot of traveling, because there are states that don't accept our marriage and the birth certificate. So it's a sad thing that we know that if we go down to Florida, we have to bring our healthcare proxies to show that if, God forbid, something was to happen to me, Chelsea can make decisions, and then vice versa. So it's something that not everybody knows.
I had no idea. And first of all, how incredibly sad. And second of all, that's so important to know. I would have never thought about that in the future. So how did you come about finding that out?
We were just told this by one of our friends who had to go through the same journey. So knowing that my mom lived in Florida, and I said, this is probably the smart thing to do. If something happens, I want her to be able to have the rights, which is odd because if I was to put some random person who is a male on a birth certificate, he would have all the rights. So it's a sad time we live in, but we have a long way to go, but we've made a lot of progress in terms of same-sex rights. So I made sure I put up a Facebook status to let everybody know this had to happen, because these are the reasons for the events that we have, because we're still fighting for rights. We don't have the same rights, even though people say we do. But it gave us a little bit of ease of mind knowing that now she has the same rights healthcare wise and decision wise as I do, even though I'm the biological mom technically, but she's still the mom. So
Absolutely. Oh, well, I love your ability to find the silver lining in that, because just hearing that is upsetting. So I love that you guys found that silver lining and that everything's squared away. And yes, we've come a long ways, but we certainly have a long way to go. But you sharing your story like this just gets the word out. So
Yes.
I really appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. So postpartum is something that I never thought I would have to deal with, because I fortunately don't have to, I don't suffer from any mental health issues, but postpartum is real. Zoe did not want to sleep, so we were up probably every 45 minutes for the first 6 weeks, and then every 3 hours until 14 months. So adding no sleep to hormonal changes, it's something you have to realize might happen to you, and you just have to kind of work through it, and you have to talk to people. I was thankful enough to have 2 friends who were pregnant at the same time that I was pregnant, so we were texting each other. I had my friend's wife who kind of dealt with the same thing, and she was a good person to talk to. So you just know that it's okay to admit that you are struggling, and it will get better. It's just something you kind of have to work through, and you have to talk to your doctor about. But TikTok is great to kind of keep you up and make sure that you're there with your kid, you're scrolling through videos, and you are awake, and you're being, safe, having a safe sleep pattern, because the last thing you want to do is fall asleep when you're holding your baby and feeding them. And it's a struggle, and using your partner, if you have one, to kind of keep you company. I know Chelsea would sit on the floor next to me and talk to me as I was feeding to make sure I stayed awake. So it's okay to know that postpartum may happen, and it could be a long journey. I was able to kind of get past it after a few weeks, but I know Chelsea struggles with it still a year later. So it's something you just have to work through and work together with people.
Absolutely. I just did an interview a couple of weeks ago, a woman who works for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And she shared some really great resources, and same type of thing, just talking about how important a support system is, and your partner knowing, because a lot of people are like, I'm fine. And so kind of reading between the lines, which is not always no fault to the partner, because it's not always that easy.
And taking help is, no matter how you deliver or how your pregnancy is. With a C-section, I needed to have a lot of help. My partner was dressing me because I couldn't dress myself. She had to pick up the baby and hand her to me so I could feed her, just because of the surgery that you went through. And your natural delivery, you're going to have the same struggle. So take the help when you can. Know that it's a hard journey, and there are people who are here for you.
What a journey you and Chelsea went on, and how much love, time, money was poured into it. And now you have 2 beautiful kiddos.
We're perfect. We're a perfect little family in our eyes. So,
well, thank you again so much for coming on here and sharing your journey. I learned a ton.
I'm glad.
So I hope that some others take some little tidbits from this and run with it. So thank you so much, Eve.
Thanks for tuning in on Pregnant Tea. I hope you've enjoyed listening to wisdom from our community of mothers and experts. If you want more relatable stories and empowering advice, head over to www.nswellness.net to subscribe for the latest content. Until next time, take care of yourself.